Welcome to the Raj and Drew Show for Entrepreneurs. I am here with Raj. Raj, how you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Drew. Thank you for asking.
Fantastic. Well, I am excited about the topic today. We are talking once again about these stages of growth that are so important for an entrepreneur to understand the various stages that they will go through, and then to figure out what stage they're in currently. And so we're going to talk about stages of growth, but we're going to put a twist on it and talk about, and this is something that you teach around with your clients, the various emotional intelligence competencies required in each stage. If you're brand new to emotional intelligence, we do have some episodes about this. If you look in the library of episodes, you can get an overview of emotional intelligence, but we're going to dive right in with the competencies that you need in stage one. So today we're going to keep it focused just on stage one. And Raj, real quick, what is the head count of an organization that's in stage one?
Stage one is generally from one employee, the founder or the entrepreneur, whoever starts, up to 10 employees.
Okay, 1 to 10 employees.
Yes.
And the two, I'll just throw it out there, the two competencies that you will need to make sure you have. Right now, competencies, we got to remember, competencies can be learned.
Exactly.
So you can learn these items. It's something that you can develop. If you're not gifted with these two items that we share, you can learn and grow. I want you to understand that you can grow in these areas. So the two competencies that we're talking about today are, number one, empathy. And I'll define empathy real quick. Empathy is simple. It's understanding and sharing the feelings of others. That's just a simple definition of empathy. And then the second competency that we're going to discuss today, and its importance to stage one of growth for an organization, for an entrepreneur, is inspirational leadership. And that makes total sense. I think people would grasp hold of that. In those early stages, you want to be able to guide and motivate others towards a shared vision. Yes. So at this stage, in that stage one, you're the visionary leader. You're casting this vision to others and saying, partner with me to do this great thing. Yes. And with that, Raj, I want to pass it on to you. Where does empathy play in specifically with hiring, right? Because we're in this startup phase and we're trying to build a team and get people around us. Maybe we've never hired anybody before, or we have limited experience with hiring folks. So how does empathy come into place in that hiring process?
So I want to bring up attention to one point here. Basically, when you are an entrepreneur, when you bring the business, basically you divide your tasks into three different aspects of it. Okay. Basically, in a stage one, basically the founder, 40% of the time, they're being a visionary. They're setting up the tone, the vision for the organization and for the future. That is 40% of the responsibility. And 50% of the responsibility is they are what we call the specialists, because they got into this business because they're good at something. There was an idea, there was a concept, something they're very familiar and they're very good at it. So if you look at it, 90 out of the 100% of the time you have are focused on himself or herself, whoever has started the company. Okay. And that is where the empathy is. Basically, he or she needs to understand when people are bought in, when people are dealing with it, do they understand my point of view? What are they going through? Because I know what I want, but when I bring in somebody else, they're not coming with the same passion. They don't understand that. For me, what comes so naturally is completely alien language for them. And that is what we really need to understand and bring in the empathy piece of it.
Yeah. So another way that you could say it, we're both trainers. So we've engaged with group trainings. And if you've gone through any speaker training, they'll tell you, read the room, right? You've got to be able to read the room. Your favorite comedians can read the room and find out if one subject is really resonating with people, and they might tell some jokes, that land with that. So this visionary entrepreneur, solopreneur that's starting to build the team, they have to be able to read the individual across from them and figure out, gauge, are they engaged? Is what I'm saying resonating with them? And are they buying into what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I'm going to give you an example. When I started my business 15 years ago,
Yeah.
and just to go back and tell you, I was a senior VP for a big Fortune 10 company when I resigned and started my own company. So the first 3 years, a lot of times when I was talking, the small business world were looking at me as though, what is this guy talking about? Because I was bringing the lingo, the language, the vocabulary of a corporate Fortune 10 company.
Yeah.
And here I was dealing with stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, 30 employees, 40 employees, 80 employee companies. And for them, all of this was alien. So I really didn't empathize with them. So I'm not even talking about employees, but empathize even with your clients, your stakeholders and customers.
That's a great point. Being able to read the person across from you, and if they're catching it, it's so common. I know I've hung out with people who have worked for large corporations, even in the university system. Everybody has their specialized lingo.
Yes.
And if you're always using acronyms, this is just a little heads up for anybody out there. If you're always using acronyms to define, an objective or a financial term, your team might nod their head, or that small business owner might nod their head, but they'll leave confused because they don't know what you're talking about. And that's not a knock on a small business owner or anything like that. It's just when you work in these bigger organizations, it's a totally different language. It's like if you went into the medical field and they have a whole terminology, a whole vocabulary that they use. And if you try to use that vocabulary with an everyday person, with any of us here, unless we have a background in healthcare, we wouldn't understand it.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that's a great point to make.
Yeah. And that's where the empathy comes and becomes very, very critical for any small entrepreneur, small business owner, or anybody working within the organization as well.
Yeah. So how does, I think I can kind of see this, but how does the inspirational leadership tie in with that hiring process? I'm guessing that it's, you're casting a vision. You're trying to get them excited about what you're doing. Is there anything beyond that?
No, there's a lot more than that. Again, I go back to the point of 90% visionary and specialist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're bringing people, basically you're not hiring for their skill, because the owner or the founder has the specialist and they have the vision. So their biggest piece of it is they're bringing in people who are there aligned, who are thinking like them, who are behaving like them. So a stage 1 company, you're always hiring for fit, not for their skills or knowledge.
Okay.
When the company is stage 4, when they have 40 employees, 50 employees, then we'll go back and hire for their skill. But stage 1 is always you're hiring for fit, because it is chaotic. Let me tell you, however good or bad it is, it doesn't matter. The stage 1 is always going to be chaotic because we don't have system, we don't have processes, we have some great ideas and concepts, and that is what we are validating with our client and customer base.
Yeah.
So what happens is we don't even know what is the perfect product.
Yeah.
We might come up with, say, these are the 2 services I'm going to offer, but when you go back and see, customers may not be accepting it.
Yeah.
They want to do the tweaking piece of it. So the specialist plays that big role, and the specialist role is always tweaking and then talking to the other people who are joining to help them understand that.
Yeah. Well, and let me just emphasize that point of hiring for fit and alignment, because I started a nonprofit years ago, launched it from scratch, started a nonprofit. We were stage 1, so less than 10 employees. And my right-hand person who was also would be client-facing in this nonprofit, very skilled in what they did, and had influence over a certain group of people that we wanted to attract to our nonprofit. But after, and this is hard to admit, but after 3.5 years, we had a lunch conversation, and I said, I just feel like you haven't understood and been able to get behind the vision. I was changing his role because of it. And he told me, I've never been behind your vision. And let me tell you, you don't want to hear that 3.5 years after investing in a person, in a startup.
Yes.
So, because it can be devastating. I mean, we ended up eventually, we fizzled out. And so the moral of the story is, listen to what Raj is saying, hire for that fit. Don't make that same mistake that I made with the organization that I started. Now, how do you do that? What are some of the indicators? Obviously, like-mindedness, but how can you, vision-wise and alignment-wise, what are some of the red flags maybe you look out for in that hiring process, especially for a person that's going to be kind of your right-hand man or woman?
So the biggest part of it is, I go back and talk, a lot of people talk about vision, mission, and values, right? That is something you go back and look at it. I generally tend to talk about purpose. I use the word mission and purpose interchangeably for our discussion, but we really want to know the purpose of the organization. And the way I define purpose is, why do we exist, without putting any dollar equation into that? If you remove the dollars piece, why are we doing this? It's more like the passion, and that comes out of it. And then what is the vision? Where would we like to see the organization go? And then what are some of the values that we need to bring to the table? So most of the time I tell the owners is, go back and start expressing those things. Because once you put the 3 to 5, 6 values, I tell them, don't have a laundry list of 20. Nobody will remember that. But if you have top 3, 4, 5, 6, that is it. I always tell no more than 5. And then make sure you clearly articulate those values. Go back and say, these are non-negotiable. It doesn't matter what happens. And now go back, and when you're talking to people and stuff, put those things in front of them and say, hey, this is what this organization is all about. What do you think?
Yeah, that's good. Well, and to your point, I have my purpose statement behind me on the wall. If anybody's watching the video of this, I've got my core values behind me. And those are to remind me, I like to do, and I like your thoughts on this, more than just a word, trust, creativity, exceed expectations, whatever. But I like to kind of write that out in a sentence, and we will exceed the expectations of the client, whatever their expectation is. We will go above and beyond that. We'll leverage creativity in the content and the style and the coaching to make sure it's engaging. We'll cultivate trust. We'll continuously build trust with our clients and potential clients, right? So kind of putting some language of what it means to you, instead of everybody can put some stuff on the wall. And even as a solopreneur, if you don't have a sentence or what that word means to you, or why trust is important to you, then once again, there can be a misalignment, or you can kind of miss that. Is that something you practice, or as far as like having people maybe do like a sentence for the value? Or okay.
No, Drew, that is very, very critical. I'm so glad you brought that, because a lot of companies who have just the values defined, put on a beautiful wall or framed in front of the entrance of the office or wherever it is. When you go back and look at it, people look at the words and say, great, but nobody knows how to follow them. And that is where the sentence. So any of my clients, if they don't have a sentence or two explaining that, then I tell them that is not a value of your organization. You have to go back and show back and explain, what does it mean? I mean, like my company, one of the biggest thing I talk about is continuous and never-ending improvement. Because I am constantly, and our organization is working with small and medium-sized businesses. So everybody who is working with me, that is one thing of a reminder and saying is, do we know what our clients will be needing 3 years from today? And are we getting ready to serve them? So we are thinking about the client needs 3 to 5 years ahead of them, and making sure we are developing the core competencies and the skills and everything else so that we can add value to them. And we sometimes challenge our customers and say they are not even thinking about it. So there are some consultants who go back, work with them and say, hey, this is your problem, we'll come and solve it. But what I would say is, because of the value, what we have is we are already talking about some of the challenges they might perceive. Even when they are not talking about it, they have not even visualized those. It's those philosophies that guide your thinking,
they ultimately guide your decisions and your actions that you take. And if you don't take the time to go deep, someone that we had as a mentor coach would say, if you fail to go within, you'll go without. And
Yes.
I think that's such a good line. I wish I could say it in a British accent, but like our coach, but it's so true. If you don't do the work of really figuring out why you think the way you think. And I'll give another example. I've had countless small business owners say, I wish my leaders would just think the way I think. And my response to that is, have you taken the time to share with them how you think, right? You have to, first you have to understand how you think for yourself, define it, write it down, articulate it, and then you have to pass it on. And if you don't do that, you're just going to keep hitting that wall, frustration. You'll rotate out new leaders, but they still, maybe you'll get lucky from time to time and people just get you and they think like you, but that's rare. And if you're, I had somebody just last week that got a unicorn like that is able to step in, think like they think, operate, and they can just let them go. And I said, in your career, something 12 to 15 year leadership career, how many times have you hired a person like that? And they thought for a moment, they said, this is the first time. Yeah, you've got to understand how you think. And I love that with how you, to inspire the leaders to define those items.
Yeah.
All right. So that's the hiring part. Did you want to say anything else on that?
So I just want to bring in the word chaos. Basically, because stage one always has chaos. Let me explain that piece of it.
Okay.
So if you go back and look at a stage one company, one of the things I tell any stage one company, less than employees, it is not even about profitability, it is survival. As a company, basically, are you generating enough cash? Are people, customers helping you and saying they're acknowledging what you're doing? And are you generating cash? Because unless you are born with a golden spoon or you have an uncle or a dad or a grandpa with a big checkbook, if you don't have that, the survival cannot stand. That's the reason why 80% of the businesses close their doors within the first 5 years.
Yeah.
So 80% of the time you're going back and really trying to generate cash for the organization. That is what the role is.
Yeah.
And for that, in order for you to do that, you're constantly changing your agenda. Like even I have a small group of people. I'll give you a simple example from my own business. I go back and say, hey, my web guys, Raj, can you please give me a content or please record a video for the social media? I promise. But a client assignment comes or a proposal needs to be done or a client has a question and then I need to travel for a few hours. And for me, anytime a cash generation opportunity comes, that is becoming my number one criteria. So my website, my content, everything takes second. And for them, it can become frustrating. That is the reason why the inspiration piece of it and the chaos piece of it, I was going to be part of it, and we need to manage that.
That's good. That's good. So that's really understanding your priority. I had a mentor that said this way. He said, the number one rule in business is don't run out of money.
Exactly.
And
yes,
he said, it's like Monopoly. You know, you're going to have to put all the pieces back in the box and you can play another day, but you're not going to play today. Exactly. And that's how it is in business. You have to prioritize cash above everything, because you can have all the greatest dreams in the world, but if you don't have the cash to fund it, then you can't move forward. So that's great point. Okay, so how does empathy or inspirational leadership, how does that help us through these chaotic times?
So the inspiration piece of it is where motivation drives everything, right? So in the same example I'm talking about, right, people are thinking that, okay, I'm not getting the support of the entrepreneur or the source. In my case, I didn't give them the content or the video. So for them, they're a little bit disappointed or they feel like they're behind. And that is where you need to go back and motivate them and say, guys, the big picture, our organization purpose is this. This is what we are working with. This is how we are going back and doing it.
Yeah.
And I say, hey, if we generate this X number of cash, we have the cash flow for the next 6 months. Now we can go back and work on the website much more comfortably, or we can get additional support for this.
That's good.
So that is where you bring in a lot of the motivation, inspiration piece of it. Because they're following you from the skill set. They're following you because of your visionary.
Yeah.
So the only thing they know is a little bit of their skills of doing the content or a website or whatever the example we have.
Yeah.
So if that you're not paying attention to, they might be a little more disappointed.
Hmm.
And that's the reason why you need to constantly keep on inspiring people. And the second piece, when you are in that stage, the chaotic situation is suddenly you have 3 clients. So there is so much of work to deliver the product or service you're doing.
Yeah.
And then the other days it streamlines and you really don't have any customers and you have a lot of time.
Mhm.
So you will have what I call cyclical busyness, idleness going on in the business in the initial stages.
Yeah.
And when you have that kind of a thing, you need to, inspiration is the only way you can manage people.
Yeah. Well, I think you are demonstrating empathy as well in that situation, because how many people wouldn't recognize that their team is disappointed in that moment and take the time to explain that I understand that you're frustrated with me not providing this to you so that you can execute on what I've asked you to do, but I have to prioritize, and you're having that conversation, right?
Yes.
So that empathy cues you in to what you need to do and how you need to address and re-inspire your team. So that's, I think you just modeled both in that example that you gave.
So I would add one more thing. People have a lot of empathy, they understand, but they don't articulate and communicate that. That is one thing I notice a lot of time in the entrepreneurs, because they're so busy. So
Yeah.
they need to prioritize that. That is where the inspiration comes, but they need to bring it to the surface. They need to talk about it and share that piece of it. The communication piece to go with the empathy becomes very, very important. If you know, my consultants, stakeholders who work with me regular basis, each one of them know if I'm missing a meeting or if I'm missing a deadline, the only reason is some client is there and they requested me of something. Everybody working with me very clearly knows that.
Yeah.
I just go back and say, guys, I'm putting a proposal together. I cannot be disturbed for the next 24 hours. Or I have to fly to certain client's place. I need to deliver this. Everything will take care of it when I come back.
That's good.
And that becomes huge, the communication piece of it.
So, okay, so we've talked about hiring. We've talked about the chaos. How about, what you really need in this early stage, in every stage, but you're establishing that performance mindset. You're establishing the foundation of what you're going to build upon. So how can inspirational leadership inspire team members to excel and really do their best?
So one of the pieces of it is we go back. A lot of people talk about visionary, but whenever you look at it from stage 1 and stage 2, you need to have 2 or 3 clear metrics so that everybody understands that. Okay. So one of the biggest metric I tell people is it's not the number of clients. Again, depending on your product or services, things can change. Yeah. But whatever you do, the number one piece of it is generating cash.
Yeah.
And remember, I'm saying generating cash, not profit.
Mm-hmm.
Cash has to be there because 2 things cash do. It motivates everybody that there is money coming in. Mm-hmm. And number 2, basically, that is a proof that your product or service is working and the customers are really accepting it. Yeah. So there is a product validation there as well, or a service validation. So those 2 combination really help us.
Yeah. That's good. And I think it's a valid point. Think through the metrics you're going to use and make sure that as you build out these departments, and the department might be one person, yes, 1 or 2 people doing operations, 1 or 2 people doing sales. You might have a person, depending on your organization. On just an example I've worked with, there's sales, there's engineering, there's operations. If engineering and operations and sales all have competing key performance indicators, then that's going to cause problems, because sales team is generate. Engineering is make sure it's right before you put it out there. And operations is left at the very end with minimal time to deliver on time. Well, if you don't deliver on time, your client's not going to buy from you again. So you've got to make sure that those few, and that's why I think you're saying just have a few metrics that you use to measure success. Make it simple. And, it might just be, for sales, sell as simple and non-complicated product as you can, and make sure that you're talking to operations and they can deliver so that the client will come back again.
Yeah. Drew, I'll share one example because you bring up a alignment of different functions and teams together. So a few years ago, I had a client who was making energy drinks.
Okay.
So for the energy drinks, the number of retail outlets is a big metric. How many retail outlets, gas stations or anything else you carry those, the more the sales, right?
Yes.
So they spent an year and they had, I'll give you just an approximate numbers. These are all not actual numbers. They had about 600 outlets carrying their product.
Okay.
So we ran a 100-day sprint. And what we said was basically in 100 days, we need to go back and beat the number. And they set up a target of 1,200 retail outlets. Just imagine, double the 600.
Double, yeah.
And what they said was every Thursday afternoon, anybody in the company would be taught how to sell it to the retail. And what they said was every single person in the company, from the janitor to HR to supply chain to operation, anybody could take an off for a half a day, go and talk to retailers. And they didn't hit the goal of 1,200, but they hit almost close to 1,100 in 100 days.
Wow.
But every single was there. Every Thursday afternoon, people had permission to get trained, go take a couple of samples, go and meet any gas stations. So the interesting part is people were taking different routes to go home and stopping at the gas stations and telling them about their product on their way home.
That's great. That is alignment at its best. Exactly. That's a wonderful example.
And a huge inspiration. Because there was a finance guy who doesn't know anything about sales or marketing and thing, and he went and opened a couple of outlets.
And he felt great, I bet, coming back and saying, this was so fun. I got to do this. I got to do something outside of my normal day. Exactly. And I got to get a win for the team towards that ultimate goal.
Exactly. And that alignment, and that is where it's a great example of that inspirational leadership. Everybody's being inspired. Everybody's telling to take actions, go back and work with. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Okay. So another segment of this early part, and it's my favorite, we talk about it often, but the employee development through one-on-one meetings. So when we think about empathy, we think about inspirational leadership. I mean, I can put together how these one-on-one meetings, how those two skills are vital for the one-on-one meetings, but just even having one-on-one meetings is, I call it the lost art of the one-on-one meeting, because it's very rare that I run into leaders that are disciplined in having those one-on-one meetings. And I think it's because maybe they never had it. And so they're lost. They don't know how to have it. So when you're talking about empathy and inspirational leadership for the stage one entrepreneur, they have 1 to 10 employees. How do those competencies play a part in one-on-one meetings?
So I want to go back to the fundamental of stage one company, because they don't have processes. They don't have standard operating procedures.
Yes.
They don't have anything written down most of the time. The only way you can go back and inspire people is having those open communication and frequent communications. And that is where in a stage one company, you're talking to 2 people versus 1 person, or one-on-one meeting. So here, when I say one-on-one meeting, sometimes it can be one in the owner with 2 people, the entrepreneur with 3 people, or one-on-one, depending on the situation piece of it. They really need to bring that, because that is the only way everybody's going to be on the same page.
Yeah.
And in that piece of it, they need to take. See, the entrepreneur, one of the biggest mistakes I have seen in the entrepreneur is, because if you look at it, 90%, they know the vision, they know the product, they're the specialist.
Yeah.
They feel like everybody knows that. So that is where I mentor and coach them and say, guys, you are very, very good at what it is, because that comes naturally. That's why you have become the entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Don't expect your people to do that. Mm-hmm. So I tell people this: 10% of your time every single day is just the one-on-one meetings or communication, a combination of the two.
Yeah.
Definitely go back and do that. So every day they're spending at least 1 hour, 60 to 80 minutes, just going back and saying, guys, this is what we are doing. This is what needs to be done. This is how it had to be executed.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be an inspiration. It can be a feedback. Any of the topics can be there.
That's powerful. Yeah, no, and I think with what you said, just being able to understand, once again, you said don't expect the team members that are not the founder to have the same drive, the same motivation, the same understanding about the organization as you do. And so you have to communicate that. You have to pass that on. And you can do that in that one-on-one setting in a mentoring type format where you're walking them through how you think and how you operate. That's powerful, especially in that stage of 1 to 10 employees. So, okay, were there any other areas where empathy and inspirational leadership show up for that stage 1 leader?
I mean, the inspiration piece of it, we are talking a lot with the employees, right?
Yes.
But I really want to go back and say it is with our stakeholders, with our potential clients, with some of the other people who are involved in helping us with the business.
Okay.
So it is going to be all the different stakeholders. An example, basically, you don't have a full-time finance person. You will have somebody assisting you part-time with bookkeeping, somebody assisting with part-time sales, somebody this thing. So think of all of these people also as part of your team.
Yeah.
And one of the things which is very interesting, and I have experienced that personally, is when I go back and talk about my purpose and my vision, I got clients just because they were so inspired with what I was telling them from that piece of it.
That's amazing.
That is something which we need to go back and keep on remembering. So definitely all of our employees has to be there, but don't forget your stakeholders. Don't forget your customers. Okay.
So what's the best example that you've seen of an inspirational leader that you've worked with or interacted with, and kind of what characteristics did they model, just so we can give something very tangible on inspirational leadership. I think people may understand the idea of understanding other people's emotions. Like you said, whether we do it or not, most of us, unless we're a psychopath, can empathize, which I'm not saying. There's probably many psychopathic entrepreneurs out there, and they're probably highly successful. But yeah, so empathy, I think we get. But what about inspirational leadership? Is there someone that comes to mind that you feel like just embodies inspirational leadership, and kind of what are those character qualities?
So I have one great example. Confidentiality, I can't share the name, but this was a software company. They were developing a special software for SaaS. It's a software as a solution. So there was 8-member team members. One of the things he made sure that every Friday before he leaves, he brings together everybody else and always gives every single person. Each of the 8 people, they have different responsibilities. He always went back and gave at least 1 or 2 pieces of positive feedback, which he got from the client or the stakeholder. Like the salesperson, he goes, hey, salesperson A, basically, these are the 2 clients. They really appreciated how you approached them and how you showed them that the product works and matches with their requirements. They really appreciated you talking to that. Hey, you coder A, somebody had a problem with it, how you went back and within 30 minutes, you fixed their problem, debugged it, solved it and stuff. So every single person, he makes it a point to go back and give them 1 or 2 positive things. He never took the negative things on Friday. He always brought in all the things that has to be changed and improved on Monday.
That's a great practice. I could see how that would be inspirational, kind of send you out with some momentum on the weekend. Yes. And yeah, what a great practice.
So that was one of the best practice I have seen. Somebody has come up and they have, I mean, basically now they are almost 75 employees and he still does with a group of people. He can't do with 75 employees, but he still brings whoever directly reporting to him. He encourages that and he does spend time with them even today.
Yeah, people thrive on encouragement. That's such a good point. Yes. So to recap, for the stage 1 entrepreneurs, empathy, understanding the people that you're bringing on board. You got to understand where they're coming from, where they're at. You've got to inspire them to go on the journey with you and continually inspire them, re-engage them, re-inspire them along the way. This will help you out with the hiring process. This is going to help you out with client acquisition. This is going to help you out with embracing the chaos, because it's going to be hit and miss. And so you have to re-engage and re-inspire your team. If you are prioritizing cash, which we emphasize, cash is what we want to prioritize in stage 1. And then finally, we talked about how You can develop your team by recognizing where they're at, understanding where they're coming from, and then continually inspiring them with the vision and developing them along that process, which is going to inspire them. Many people, when I've had conversations, I don't know about you, Raj, but people don't leave because of a paycheck. It's very rare that people leave just because of the money. They many times leave because they don't see a future there, which inspirational leadership will cover that, will help out with that. And they aren't getting developed. They don't feel like they're growing. And so they go, why am I here? I'm not being grown. My friend down the street said they're growing their career in the last year. They've learned so much, and I feel like I'm in the same place I was a year ago. I need to find another spot. And so it's going to help you with retention. Was there anything else you want to say before we sign off for this episode?
No, thank you. You did a fantastic job of summarizing everything else. If you are entrepreneur out there looking at it and hearing the summary piece of it, there is one piece of advice I would say. If people are living for a salary, then you are underpricing and undervaluing their roles. So just go back and check. There is a small percentage of people who live because they are not making the market value. That is the only piece I would add to that piece of it. Whenever you are underpaying your employees, then definitely people might live for money because they want to make a fair wage, what the market is paying. So that is the only situation I would add. Other than that, it is always the opportunity to learn and grow, or the manager not really inspiring them and giving them feedback and working with them.
That's perfect. Perfect. Great point. Well, that was fantastic. So stage one, empathy and inspirational leadership. I thought that was a great teaching and great podcast. I really enjoyed your stories, Raj, and I'll look forward to stage two and the competencies that we'll need in that stage. So if you're a stage two entrepreneur, be looking forward to our next podcast. With that, I'm going to sign off. And Raj, it was great. It was great recording this with you. And everybody out there, have an awesome week.
Thank you, Drew. Have a great week, everybody.